Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Joey Sturgis Tones. Creating unique audio tools for musicians and producers everywhere. Unleash your creativity with Joey Sturgis Tones. Visit joeysturgistones.com for more info. And now your hosts, Joey Sturgis, Joe Wanasek, and EYAL Levy.
Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. I'm kind of sick today.
Damn, so you sound sick, dude.
If I sound like a mutant, then this is Joey speaking. I should probably clarify that. Today we have a really awesome guest, a good friend of ours, and I would consider one of the most badass people in the scene, Mr. Misha Mansoor. Hello, how are you?
Hey, how you doing? With that intro, I almost thought you had you were introing the wrong person for a second there. The most badass. Jeez. It's like the first time anyone other than my parents have called me badass. Thank you.
Dude, you deserve it.
Yeah, you deserve it. I got to say that, I don't know if you remember this, but me and you were emailing years ago, and I think it was right around the time that my guitar record, Avalanche of Worms, came out. I think that your first Periphery record came out the same day. Something like that.
I remember that's when we first started talking. I remember you sent that to me, and I was like, yo, this is crazy. I was like, I didn't know that someone can play guitar like that. Like it was pretty nuts. I was like, damn.
Well, I felt the same. Well, thank you. I felt the same way about Periphery, and I remember you being like, I hope that people like it. And I think it's safe to say that people liked it.
Well, some people. I think you know, if we're honest, we've always been a very polarizing band. I didn't realize just how much we would be then. Some people liked it. Some people like it very much. Some people very much dislike it. But in hindsight, I think that's really worked to our advantage.
Well, do you feel like it means anything if people just have a lukewarm response? I find that the best artists are polarizing.
You know, it's an interesting thing because I guess in terms of success, maybe it's probably a better thing. Like, I've never really cared. Like, especially with the way that we started, which it was just, you know, me in my bedroom making music. It was just kind of having fun, and that was always the goal. So even if people thought it sucked, I still had fun making it, which was kind of the point. So that's always the way that I've looked at it, and that's always the way that people have looked at it. But, you know, being polarizing it's just kind of interesting, you know? It's kind of interesting to see what people take away from it, because regardless of what anyone will say, I'm very stubborn, so I'll always have my own point of view on it, and no one will really be able to change my mind on whether that's positive or negative. If I think something sucks, no one will be able to convince me that something that I've done is good, even if they're, you know, sort of telling me like how much they love it. It won't change anything. I'll still think it sucks. So I'm kind of stubborn like that.
You know, that's interesting. One thing that I've always told people is in order to not get depressed over the not bad press, but the bad comments, the negativity, you can't take the good stuff too seriously either. It's like you can't have it both ways. It's, if you really want to not be affected by the negativity, just try to not care what people think, period. If it's good or if it's bad, just stay true to what's inside of you and what you actually think about it. Because like you said, if you think you did something that sucks, who cares what anybody else thinks? Because you're your own, you're your own barometer, basically.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, but again, that's not like a conscious decision on my part. That's just me being really stubborn. It's just me being very me, because I like what I like. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. That may change, but in the moment, I always know that. And I know when something's hitting the mark and when it's not. And when something's not quite there, it doesn't matter what anyone says. Like, it's not going to change that fact. There's only a few people in the world who can change my mind about that, and they'll be sort of band members or people that I'm working with who I trust musically, because that's why I'm working with them. But aside from that, and even then, that can be that can be challenging. But yeah, it's I guess it's my relationship with my music, if that makes sense. You know, everyone has their own relationship with their music and their own process. So this is by no means a judgment on people who do things differently. It's just the way. It's music's this weird thing. It's weird. It's a weird thing, and.
Is it still weird to you now, years into it being your livelihood and you doing so many different things? Does it still have that weird personal thing that's hard to define?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a weird thing. Like, I'm very appreciative of music, and obviously I love it, but I have this very weird relationship with music. I have a very, very weird relationship with music because it's like half love, half resentment. You know, like I still feel like a worthless musician. You know, like that never went away. And I think if I've grown in any ways, kind of maybe acceptance of the fact that will never go away, rather than trying to overcome that. Because it seems like the better I get on a technical level, or the more I work at this or that, it's just the further away I realize I am from actually being good at anything. So I've realized that for me, it's just having fun. But there's also this guilt that comes with it. Now I'm gonna open up to you guys on this podcast.
Open up, dude.
There's this guilt that comes with it because we've seen a little bit of success, and we're fortunate enough, and I'm fortunate enough to make a living with music. So now there's this like expectation. There's this voice in the back of my head that's like, well, come on, you asshole, you got everything you wanted. You have your studio, you can make music anytime. Aren't you making music right now? And that's not necessarily a healthy way to approach making music. You shouldn't be making music out of guilt. You should be making music because you want to. And it's just this interesting dichotomy, this sort of battle that goes on inside my head sometimes that I need to get over a little bit. But yeah.
I've actually had that same exact battle because it's like you think about people who would sell their own parents to have these types of, I guess, advantages or situations in their lives, outcomes, like the studio, like having a fan base, like any of those things. And then sometimes it's like, well, tonight I just don't want to make music. I just want to hang out.
Exactly. And like that has to be okay.
It messes with your head.
But that has to be okay by definition. I mean, if we look at it on a very basic level, like why did I start making music? It's because I wanted to. It wasn't because like I felt an obligation to do so. And I think that honestly, it's a little bit of a dynamic that maybe some people get tricked into falling into. And what I mean is, like, let's say like you're a band that's put out a record and it does really well. All of a sudden you have pressure from fans, from label management, from everyone to put out another one. And usually that first record is a culmination of years and years of your best ideas. And then this next one, they're like, all right, well, you're going to have a couple months off between these two tours. Let's get a record together. And it's like, whoa, come on, man. Like, that's not how that works. But at the same time, now you have this pressure to do that. And you might be writing music when you don't necessarily want to write music. And that's an unhealthy dynamic in my mind that kind of gets pushed.
Dude, that's not a good thing.
It's not. No, it's unhealthy. And it's not going to yield good music. And that's where some resentment can start, I think, is this idea that I have to. You started out by wanting to, and now you have to. And it's not that, like, you have to in sort of a miserable way, because it's still something that you love, but it's just not going to be the best stuff if it's not coming from sort of a genuine want of like, oh, no, I have a great idea. I want to do this. Now it's like, oh, all these arbitrary reasons are the reasons why I'm in front of the computer or sitting with my guitar trying to write something,
Well, and I guess that the one of the true measures of, I guess, a pro or of a great artist in this day and age is someone I think those feelings are natural, actually, because I've had them too, and lots of people I know have had them. But I think the measure of a real pro is the person who can put those feelings aside and then just go kick ass. But I think also there comes a point where you need to realize that maybe now is not the best time to be trying to make music, just because you kind of do have a responsibility to put out something great, and working all the time does not necessarily equal that something great will come out. So
absolutely.
That's the important. So this guilt that you're talking about, it's irrational because
completely irrational.
Because really, your responsibility is not to be working 16 hours a day every single day. Your responsibility is to put out great stuff, and by having that guilt and by working 16 hours a day, that doesn't necessarily equal putting out great stuff. So that's why it's kind of irrational, because one does not equal the other.
It's logic versus emotions, man. They're battling all day in there, you know? Who knows who's going to win?
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, we can say that it's irrational all day, but the feelings are feelings.
By virtue of being irrational, you know, it's you're not going to ever rationalize it out of your head. So, you know, it's just kind of there, and you just learn how to deal with it. Anyways, it's sounding like it's like a huge problem or something. It's not. I'm not even complaining, but it's just some insight into like what I guarantee you 99% of musicians, if not 100% of like sort of pro musicians who are in the system, if you will, deal with this to some degree. And it might not be something that people are entirely aware of, because it's easy to look at the happy side of things, you know? But you just learn to deal with it, really.
There's something about you, though, that I've noticed, even going back to our first interactions before we knew each other on the Ultimate Metal Forum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Something
days.
that's like sort of, I would almost say, you know, the part of your DNA or something is that you're extremely humble, and you're also extremely inquisitive of what's true and what's good. And I think those are the important ingredients that make up successful people. And I think, you know, not only with your band is that important, it's important in business and everything that you're involved in. And I just admire that. And I think that our listeners can benefit from me pointing that out, knowing that, you know, you can have a little bit of an ego. And I'm not saying you have an ego. I mean, people can have an ego, but still be humble. And I think you manage that or balance that in a really, really admirable way.
Thanks, man. I mean, I don't even think that I'm humble. I think I'm just sort of realistic and grounded. For example, if I genuinely thought I was sick, I wouldn't be afraid to tell people that, because it would be a fact. You know, and I don't think that there would be anything wrong with that either, because you'd just be speaking factually. And if you were like falsely humble about it, then that's kind of condescending, in my opinion, you know? So I'm not so much into that. It's just more that that's genuinely how I feel about myself. When I say, like, I don't think I'm that great, it's not me being humble. It's me being like, you know, I have seen what's out there. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Internet. And like, I'm very well aware of the fact that I'm really not that great. What I seem to be doing seems to be, it seems to be resonating with people, and that's great. But again, because I don't feel genuinely that great about what I do in the grand scheme of things, it's like I can't think that I'm the shit. Like, I'll never think that, because there's just so much more talent out there. So I just think it's being realistic and being grounded. If ever that changes, if ever like I hit my head and I become like, you know, the best guitarist or something, I won't be afraid to tell people that I'm good, because it'll be true. But until that point in time, why would I say that? Because I'm not, you know, I know what my weaknesses are. I know where I have to work on stuff in pretty much every aspect. So I'm just going to focus on that. And I think I've tried to surround myself with people who are sort of grounded in the same way, because it leads to a healthy environment. And as you said, Joey, it's like it's something that I've recognized in successful people. Like, they do behave a certain way, they do look at life a certain way, they look at opportunities a certain way. And if you're overly egotistical, sometimes it sort of can cloud your perspective and judgment in those situations in a way that'll work against you. So I think that's what I've sort of taken away from that.
Well, yeah, if you're overly clouded by the ego or by the intoxicating smell of your own made up badassery, it can really, I guess, muddy the waters when determining what's a realistic opportunity to jump on, what's worth the risk, what's not worth the risk, what can you actually pull off, what can you not pull off, how should you proceed. Like, you need to have a clear head to make these decisions, because it's a tough world out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You cannot let yourself get clouded by dumb things like pride and ego.
No.
Just think back to Pulp Fiction, where he tells Bruce Willis to go down in the fight, and he says that he's going to feel pride stinging him, and to just ignore that shit. And I totally think about that scene a lot when I feel like my pride is getting in the way of my decision making.
Right.
By not going down in the fight in that scene in Pulp Fiction, he basically had the mob after him trying to kill him, whereas if he had just ignored his pride, he would have walked off a millionaire.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I never looked at that scene quite that way, but that's actually a really good point.
Yeah, you got to put your pride aside. Now, another thing that you said that I keyed in on is about how it's not about being humble, it's about being realistic. You know what's out there. I've always felt the same way when people compliment my playing or whatever. It's like, yeah, but Jeff Loomis. Or,
Yeah, right?
yeah. Yeah, like, it's like,
I know
cool,
you
like,
guys understand because you guys have worked with like insane musicians too, and it's like, well, I'm aware of what's out there.
yeah, so you can't fool me with your compliments, dude.
Like I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not going to agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even humility, it's just being honest.
Yeah. It's like 8 is more than 2. It's not, that's just the fact, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And Jeff Loomis is better at guitar than I am. That's a fact. That's not me being humble. That's me just being realistic.
Yeah, exactly. And if I was better than him, I would be okay to say it nicely, but I will never be better than him.
Right.
So, and I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. It's like, it's all right that I'm not, that's the thing. It's like you enter this weird dynamic all of a sudden where it's all about just sort of like sentiments that aren't actually saying anything. It's just wasted breath and energy. Whereas really what it's about is like, no, I know where I'm at and I'm okay with that, and that's knowing where I'm at allows me to be okay with that and allows me to sort of work on myself in a realistic manner, in a reasonable manner, rather than thinking that I'm better than I am and being like, well, why is this not happening? Why am I not able to do, it's like, you're just, that's a disservice to yourself, really.
I completely agree. So I have something that I've wanted to ask you for years.
Ask away.
So I'm going to ask now. Now's the opportunity. So when you guys got signed, you basically did what I thought was my dream, because a little bit of background was when I went to music school, I basically failed because I never went to class, and I just studied guitar in my room the whole time and music business, and I learned about how the industry works instead of going to class, and it seems to have worked out. But like, so in all my studies, what I came to was that the smartest way to get signed would be to not sign worldwide deals, but to do distribution deals for different territories and all that, the way you guys did it. And I always wanted to do that, but my band never got the clout to be able to pull that off, to be able to negotiate that. And so when I saw that you guys did that back then in 2009 or 8 or whatever that was,
around then.
I was like, wow, they actually did this. This is like if I was to write a book about how people should approach getting signed in the new era of the music industry, this would be the way to do it. And I can't believe that a band in our genre actually pulled this off. And I've always wanted to tell you that I really respect that you pulled it off, and I want to hear more about it.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm glad. That's something that we haven't really talked too much about, so I'll be happy to tell you all about it. So yeah, I mean, that deal was very different. And I'll start this off by saying that deal was a deal that pretty much every label's, like, we knew exactly what we wanted. That was the first part. Is we knew exactly what we wanted, and we went to these labels, and they came to us. We had labels coming to us, so we're like, hey, why should we sign with you? What's so great about you? Which is, first of all, that's the first thing I always tell someone. It's like, don't go like begging for a record deal. Wait for them to come to you. Go build your name, and then when they're coming knocking down, then you get to ask that wonderful question. Hey, well, what's so great about you? Why should I go with you guys instead of these other guys?
Like, did you actually say it in those words?
Well, I mean, you want to be polite, but yeah, but that's a sentiment. That's a sentiment. It's like, so why do you believe that we should go with you? As opposed to, oh, please, will you sign my band? Which is the attitude, like, here's a demo, check us out. This is blah, blah, blah. It's like we had labels coming to us being like, hey, so you guys want to go pro? You guys want to join the big boys? But we knew exactly what we wanted. And when we told them that, every label was like, there's no way you're going to get that deal. There's absolutely no way. You're not going to get that from us, and no other label is going to ever give you that deal. And then our answer was like, all right, fine. So there was like probably 2 or 3 years of that. Of labels coming to us, like not every label, but like all the ones that would sort of be appropriate for us. Everything from like local labels to big labels like Roadrunner and Sumerian.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Do you realize how like crazy that is though? Because how many bands have you seen, unsigned bands, who like are like nope to labels, and then that's it, never get another opportunity?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, okay, so we were lucky because we asked a lot of questions. I asked everyone in the industry. I remember all our friends. I remember asking BT Bam about their deal, and they were like, yeah, we were 18 when we signed. It was garbage. Don't sign to Victory. Common knowledge now, but like, that was really good to know. Victory definitely tried to court us, but obviously they never would have given us what we wanted. And we asked all sorts of people for advice. Anyone who was in the industry, we asked for advice, and that's how we kind of formed what it is we were after. And what it came down to me was this: we were at a transitional time in the industry. Before that point in time, records were extremely expensive to make, right? So
yeah.
Your record deal with a marketing budget, I mean, you'd be looking maybe at $100,000 all the way to $1 million, right? Mm-hmm. You try to get that money from a bank, they're gonna laugh at you. There's no way, even pre-2007, there's no way they're gonna give that money to a musician. So really, record labels were just banks. And they were taking your masters as collateral. So that's why that deal made sense. And you'd get like, a piss poor royalty, like, at best you'd be getting like 14%, and they would take your record sales, and depending on the deal, like at that point in time with downloading, they were starting to do like what were called 360 deals, which was their clever way of, I love businessmen because they're so good at like spinning like a shitty deal into seeming like it's a great thing. But the 360 deal came around, and that basically meant that like they would take a share of everything you made. But the way that they would pitch it was so great. They would say like, well, we're going to enter a partnership, so it's a profit and risk share, but really what it means is they don't have to put nearly as much money into your band because like it doesn't cost as much to make records anymore, and they get to take 50% of whatever you make, or whatever percentage was negotiated of whatever you make out of your merch, out of everything, which used to be untouched because CD sales used to cover that. Now people are stopping, people weren't buying as much CDs, so they're like, well, we got to make money from somewhere. Their business models couldn't be supported off of CD sales anymore, so they got clever. Bands were doing the 360 deals. We knew to stay the fuck away from those. I can swear, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You can fucking say whatever you goddamn want.
All right, great. Well, that'll be my only fuck of the... Oh, fuck, god damn it, fuck. All right, anyways. But yeah, that was a deal we knew to stay away from because, once we understood how it operated, we're like, yeah, that's a rotten deal. And so basically, I was going to these labels, and I was just trying to approach it from a pragmatic angle. I was like, well, look, like, you don't need to give us much advance money. In fact, you don't need to give us any advance money. Like, we're going to deliver something that you can literally just put out, Why would we give you the masters? Why would you own the masters? I understand if you're giving us a $250,000 loan why you want the masters. But now all we're asking is it's a low risk thing on your end. All you have to do is just put this out and you make money, And that's what sort of changed the conversation a little bit. It was because we were doing everything ourselves and because it was such a low-risk venture. And a lot of these companies were on the fence. Like, I remember Monty Connor was on the fence, and Monty didn't really get what we were doing. He was at Roadrunner, or was at Roadrunner back then, for those who don't know. But he was saying, look, like, you know, I don't get your guys' music. Like, I really don't see what all the fuss is about, but I got a bunch of people in my office that say I'd be crazy if I didn't sign you guys.
I love his honesty.
Yeah, no, I did too. I was so thankful for it. I found it so refreshing. And I actually told him, I was like, yo, dude, thank you for your honesty first and foremost. Honestly, we probably would want to work with a label that is stoked on what we're doing. But like, thank you for not wasting our time. Like, that really meant a lot. And that's why I always liked Monty, because I knew that like he would be a no bullshit kind of. I could tell he was just a no bullshit music fan, you know.
You know what he told me about the first Doth record, the unreleased one? I mean, the self-released one.
Oh, what did he say?
When he heard it, he said, "You should take this record and bury it so deep so that no one could ever find it, even if a flood takes place."
Well, that's honesty.
Yeah, exactly.
That sucks.
Yeah, no, I thought it was hilarious, but
that is funny. Well, I mean, you know, it's that same sort of brutal honesty. He was like, "Yeah, I don't get you guys. I don't see why you guys are going to be a thing. Like, it's not my thing. But everyone in my office says like that I should look at you. So that's why we're talking." And he also didn't want to give me the kind of deal that we wanted. And the good thing about Sumerian was that back then, you know, Sumerian's a force now, but like back then, when other labels like, well, who else, you know, do you have looking? If I brought up Sumerian, they're like, who? You know? And that was the beauty of it, was Sumerian was just starting, you know? And Ash, as a result, was willing, already he was offering a very competitive deal, because he wanted to do the 360 deal, but he wanted to do 50% royalties, which was a lot better. But we were like, yeah, you can't touch the other stuff. We don't want a 360 deal. And we were saying, look, like, you're great in the States. What can you do for us in Europe and Canada? Like, you have nothing there, you know? We really should just go with labels that specialize in those territories. They'll push for us. And, you know, there's a lot of back and forth over years. And then finally he was like, all right, what's it going to take for us to sign you? And I told him, I was like, you know, this is what it's going to take. And he's like, all right, we'll make it work. So it was just knowing what we wanted, being patient, talking to other labels. And here's the funny thing, is the second that Ash accepted our deal, I think a bunch of the other labels, but definitely Roadrunner, was like, oh shit, did we just fuck up? Like, because Monty was then like, shit, like, I guess someone would give them that deal, and it might as well have been us. Now, we had already signed for Canada with Distort at that point in time, but basically Monty came back and was like, look, let's scoop you up for basically every other territory. And since Roadrunner was such a force, it made sense. They had their own offices they have their Australian office, their European office and all that, so they could specialize in those territories in a way that smaller labels like Sumerian couldn't. So that worked out pretty well in the end. And although we didn't end up working with Monty himself, he did facilitate that deal, and, you know, we're really thankful for that. So he's been really good to us, despite the fact that we never directly worked with him, you know? But yeah, that's how that deal sort of came about. It's just patience and knowing what you want and being able to say no.
Man, that takes some balls to be able to say no to that level of offer.
Yes and no. I think the thing is that, like, we also started out after the transition. I think the reason that this time was a bit difficult for bands was because they went from bands and labels. Let's just say, though, like, most of the music industry on that side of things was, they were very successful doing something and having a business model that worked out just fine, and then one day it doesn't, for no reason, basically, for a really dumb reason. And what everyone really wants is for it to bounce back, and it's not bouncing back. It's just getting worse. We entered in on the side of like, hey, well, we have no delusions about this. There's no money in this industry. Let's just do this for the love. So if we're doing it for the love, we're going to do it right. We're not going to be sort of tempted by money and fame and all this stuff. Like, for God's sakes, we're playing like progressive metal. Like, You know, how much money is there in this anyways? So if we're gonna do a deal, let's do it right. Let's not compromise on that. Let's get the thing that we want, and if we don't get it, we'll just wait around and just keep on keeping on, you know, and just see what happens.
I guess, all right, that makes perfect sense the way you explain it. I guess it takes someone who actually understands reality for what it is. Back to what we were saying earlier about it's not humility, it's just being realistic and understanding. Like we were talking about
this
the
is why we
guitar
were
playing.
asking. This is why we were asking people for advice. Look, we didn't understand the climate, but we understood that we didn't understand the climate, and that the climate seems to be changing every 6 months to a year. So it's like all the books written about the industry were irrelevant. All the information, all the experts were wrong. So we're like, well, why don't we ask bands who are in it? Like, what sucks right now? What do you wish you had done differently? And we made sure that our deal reflected that, you know? And I'll say, you know, it's pretty amazing that we got the deal that we did in hindsight, but it was just because we had a label that was starting out and that really wanted us, that saw the potential of grabbing us and was willing to sort of give up a lot of what they originally wanted to have in order to have us. They did the long play on that one, and I'd say that worked out pretty well for both of us.
Now, you realize that this type of thinking is not common among musicians. Like, that's some innate business sense that you just don't find every day in our community. Do you have any idea where you got those instincts from?
Yeah, my dad's an economist.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. And we're Jewish. Could stereotypes come into this at all? No. I mean, it's like, you know, money's been it's always been something that I guess I've always been aware of money. I've always tried to not take it for granted. I've always tried to understand. I don't know. It's just the business side. I think it's fascinating to me. I think the business side is fascinating to me. And I think I've always been aware. Like, my parents were not the kind of people to spend money frivolously. They were very, very my dad especially, very calculated. My dad can stretch $1 like further than just about anyone that I know. So, you know, this all started, by the way, you know, my dad's like that story of like, you work hard, you get a good life. Like, you know, went to London School of Economics and then grad school at Harvard, and like, it's just been successful because he works hard, right? Mm-hmm. Try telling that guy, hey dad, so I'm dropping out of college because I want to do music, you know? Like, now he was supportive because he's like, you know, like you should do what you want to do. But he was like, look, like, it's a tough industry. You know, most people don't make it. Now, you should try it, but you need to work hard. I don't want you to think that this is some excuse to just sit around and be lazy and play video games all day, you know? Like, you need to actually do it. And he was like, look, we'll let you move back home. You'll pay us a very reduced rate of rent, and you'll work full time. And if you do that, we'll let you live at home for cheap. And in your free time, you can work on music. And that was the deal. So there was always this sense of like, don't take any of this for granted and like really make it count. And then I guess, you know, just being aware of the business side and that what I'm entering is a business, you know, like it's fun, but it is still a business and you should give it that level of respect. And it's like, you know, do you want this to be like this fun thing that you do with your friends on the weekend, or do you want this to be like the real deal? Because that's going to change your attitude. That's going to change how you approach this and every decision that you make. And that's what we decided early on, is that we were going to run this like a business and treat it with that level of respect.
It's interesting to me that you say that you refer to it as respect, because I completely agree. Is respect the vessel, basically. Respect, if you treat it with that level of respect, you will make better decisions, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And you won't do the frivolous things and the dumb things that, well, hopefully you won't do the dumb and frivolous things that bands and artists do that basically shoot themselves in the foot over. I think that that's fascinating. It's so uncommon for musicians to go in with that type of thinking. You know, something maybe you could elaborate on. You know how a lot of people, like, how do I say this? It's a cliche term to say your band is a business, but it's true. Your band is a business, but it's one of those things like in recording when we say just use your ears, and it's like, okay, just use your ears, but what does that even mean? Just use your ears? Because if your ears aren't developed, just use your ears doesn't really mean much, because you can't even hear what you're supposed to hear, right? Like if if you can't spot what 8.5K is up a dB, then using your ears isn't going to help you to hear 8.5 up a dB. So when we say treat your band like a business, okay, but what does that actually mean?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like in the later years, I've been being sort of a dose of real talk with people, whether it's like, at clinics or VIP or whatever opportunities I get. But I don't mind being honest about this kind of stuff. And I feel like it's probably needed, like, because it's not what people want to hear, but it's sometimes what they need to hear. What I'd say is that if treat your band like a business doesn't mean anything to you or doesn't translate into something that seems to benefit you, you probably don't have it. In the same way that if use your ears when you're mixing doesn't seem to, like, if you can't trust your ears, or if when you trust your ears it doesn't yield a better result, maybe it's not the right thing for you. And that's a truth. Like, not everyone is cut out for everything, like, guess what? I suck at most things in life. So there's most things, if you gave me that generic advice that works for most people, like, oh, just do that, just follow through when you hit the ball, like that shit, like, means nothing to me. Like, but yeah, that's just gibberish. It's like, I feel like that's what I'm doing, but it's making things worse. If that's the case, then maybe it's not for you, and that has to be okay too. It's not everyone will succeed in their various fields. It's important to find something that sort of does work for you. And that's not to say that you can't learn, and that's not to say that people who have a innate sense of it can't hone it further, because I'm definitely no expert on any of this stuff. But I have noticed that I had a tendency towards it, and I have associated myself, and the band members have a tendency for it. And guess what? That's a great thing to have. It's a great resource to have when everyone in your band really gets it. And it skips so many arguments because everyone's on the same page about that kind of stuff. They understand that the band needs to be run a certain way, and they will give the band a certain amount of respect in that sense, because that's a very, very important thing to everybody.
Yeah, you've got some smart dudes in your band, and that's really, really remarkable, by the way. You're just, coming from my production background, it's not normal. It's just not normal, dude. To find a band where there's that many smart people who, not just smart, but like that many entrepreneurs in a band. Normally, in a band, and I'm talking about successful bands, there's the one guy, right? The one guy who's like the visionary, and then maybe the one guy who's like technically really good, and then the three guys that are just good looking or cool enough. And I'm not talking shit. It's just the way it is. It's not normal to have a bunch of like alpha entrepreneur types that are really cool and really get it and really intelligent all in a band, and the results speak for themselves. And I think that's that leads me to one of the other things I want to talk to you about, which is a lot of your side ventures like GGD or Horizon. Like, I think that it's this is what you guys are doing. First of all, I think it was a great example of, like I said earlier, like the way you guys signed your deal was, if I was to write a book about how people should approach getting signed in the new age, I would have a chapter devoted to you guys. And I've thought that for years now. And
wow.
And then also, if I was going to write a chapter about how musicians should develop alternate revenue streams in lieu of record sales not being what they used to be, I would write a chapter on you guys. So basically, I would write a book about you.
So basically, I should get some royalties on this book, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is if I write the book. Yes.
Hey, you should write that book.
All right, yeah, that's fine. We'll do a 360 deal with the boat.
Yeah, we'll do a 360.
But for real, it's. I remember when I was going to school, they told us that you should develop multiple revenue streams. But what they meant was royalties, T-shirts, and publishing.
Right.
They didn't mean what you guys are doing, obviously, because a lot of this stuff didn't exist yet. They didn't mean make your own pedal company, make your own drum sample company, and all these things that you guys do. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. First, I want to talk a little bit about the individual side ventures that you guys do, but then also what brought that about. Is that just an innate thing? Again, like, you guys are just a bunch of entrepreneurs? Because, like, for instance, people who might not be aware, Matt, your drummer, like, he did Band Happy years ago.
Right.
This is what you guys do. You guys make businesses.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, so Matt basically joined the band when we sort of became a real touring band, right? And I think having Matt and I are very much the entrepreneurs, I'd say the other guys sort of picked it up from being surrounded by strong personalities. Like, Matt and I are pretty strong personalities in the band. So, the other guys sort of picked up and they had a knack for it. But I guess they just never really had been pushed into that. But then they realized, oh, wait, you can do this kind of stuff. So everyone's kind of become very entrepreneurial as a result, and it's become like a healthy place to discuss that kind of stuff and to follow that kind of stuff. And it's also interesting because, you mentioned Band Happy, but Band Happy failed, but was such an important lesson for Matt. And it also shows you, it's like that the cliche. I hate those goddamn motivational poster things, but like, it's that sentiment of like, yeah, if it fails, so what? You learn something, move on. And
dentist office posters.
Right. So exactly. It's like, but it is really that. I mean, like, we don't have any posters for it, but that's literally what happened. Matt was bummed out about it, and then just bounced right back and just got into new things, and those things have been successful. It's just, and that's the kind of mentality. It's like, well, what's the worst that can happen? You'll fail, and then you just do the next thing.
I just did a podcast where I answered a question about how do I get over my fear of submitting things, and my answer is just fuck it, because if you submit something and people hate it, a mix or whatever, or your business venture, or you submit your band to get signed and you don't get the deal, or you don't get the mix, or your business fails or whatever, fuck it, who cares? What's the worst? You're not going to die.
It sucks, and you just do the next thing. Just focus on the next thing. Like, it just means that didn't work. It doesn't mean that you suck. It means that idea didn't work. And it's not even that the idea sucked necessarily. It might just not have been delivered properly. Who knows? Learn from why it didn't work, basically, is the point, and do the next thing. And that's what we do. That's what all of us do. But I think this idea that when you're an entrepreneur, you can make your business about whatever you want. So you make it about things you care about. It's kind of sweet. So us being musicians and having this entrepreneurial spirit means that we're going to be involved in the music industry because it's things that we genuinely care about. And if Periphery's ever been a lesson for anything, it's like, do things you genuinely give a shit about. Like, Periphery's always been a way of, it's just a vessel for self-expression. So, and no matter who's come in and tried to pollute that with, talk of like being a radio band or fame or money or whatever, it's very easy to tell those people to fuck off because we genuinely don't have any interest in that. And especially as we transition to this point, Periphery's never made a lot of money, and even as it stands, doesn't make a lot of money. Like, everyone in the band makes a pretty good living, but we do it outside of the band, maybe because of the band, but not directly as a result of the band's income. The band's income is very limited, so that gives us this freedom to enjoy the band and make it just about the music, make it just about what we want, and we'll never be tempted by these things that could sort of corrupt it. Well, that also extends to these businesses. These are all passion projects. They all started out as just things that we're like, this is something cool, this is something that we'd like. And in starting something that's a passion project, it's very easy to not let it get corrupted, you know? And I think that that's where a lot of the problems come up, is when, you know, you have a good idea, but then you get a taste of money or fame or whatever, and then you sort of compromise that idea because you want a bit of that. It's like, I've started to realize that if you genuinely have something that's good and something that you're passionate about, that alone can allow it to exist and be good enough. And if you handle the business side in a smart fashion, you shouldn't have to sell your soul to make it work.
I think that's very, very wise. So, more specifically then, what needs were you trying to fulfill, I guess, by doing these projects? Like, why Horizon?
Okay, so like Horizon was just because I love pedals. I have so many pedals. And my deal with Protone sort of ran its course, and I was actually talking to my dad about it, and I was like, yeah, you know, I'm having trouble finding another company that's going to be a good fit. My dad was like, why don't you just start your own? And I was like, come on, Dad, I can't just start a pedal company, you know?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, and that it's so funny because like he was totally right, but like of course my first reaction to my dad's gonna be like, no, Dad, come on, shut up, you know?
It's exactly how I reacted to my friend telling me to make a plugin company. I was like, you can't just start a plugin
you can't
company.
Just do that. And then you mull it over for a few days, and you're like, wait, but maybe I can, you know?
Yeah.
And then the idea becomes very attractive. Yeah, it's you know, I guess it's just that initial inertia to change, but then like once it catches, then you get the momentum of that, and it's like, okay, no, this is what I want to do. And I you know, luckily, just being in the industry and having a lot of friends and contacts, like I realized that I had some good contacts. So my buddies Maytab and Brian, who do wired guitarist and string drop, and you know, just generally brilliant marketing guys. Like I've always just talked to them over the years about marketing stuff because I knew they were like real geniuses with that. I was like, hey, so I'm thinking about doing this. Like, you think this is a good call? Is this anything that maybe you'd be interested in? And they were like, well, let's think about it. And they were like, yeah, you know what? This could be worth looking at, you know? And we just kind of started talking, and it was kind of something that the more we talked about it, the more excited we got about it. And that's that sign. That's how you know. And it's the same thing with like a band or business, a song or whatever. It's like you kind of get this like gut feeling after a certain point when you're onto something that you're like, yeah, I think we're onto something here, you know? And that's what we were getting there. And so then eventually it was just like, this is something that we're all really excited about. Like, let's get this going, you know? And that's what started the ball rolling on that. Something like GGD, for example. Like, so we have our drum sample company. You know, we'd been using Tune Track since I started recording. You know, and it was just like, hey, well, guys, I think we have the resources to do one of our own, you know? And it wasn't to try to be competitive or anything. It was literally just for fun. It was just like, wouldn't it be sweet to have our own drum samples? Like, wouldn't it be sweet to have Matt's playing in Matt's kit? Like, I'm already programming stuff for Matt in his style. Like, I'd love to have his samples. I think his drums sound great. I think Nolly makes his drums sound great. Like, if I could have that on my computer, I'd be so stoked. And if we have it, we could probably try to sell it too, you know? And that's how that started. But these were just literally just passion projects. I think they came from the right place for me because they were just things that I wanted. So we made them. And that's kind of a good angle to start from, in my opinion.
Let me just tell our listeners, those of you who are subscribed to Nail the Mix, you get $20 off Get Good Drums in our bonuses section. They were nice enough to provide a code just for you guys. So if you're subscribed, go to the bonuses and look up the Get Good Drums bonus and get those drums because they sound great. So now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, happy to do it. What I thought was interesting, because I was watching the product videos about the Horizon pedals, and I thought that it was very, very smart to do something pedal-wise that actually addresses modern issues like extended range guitars, low tunings, and digital amps like the Kemper, for instance. Because we do all love our tube screamers, but they're not designed for modern music. And I think it's so cool that you guys took something that's classic, that seems like people will always love overdrives, but you tweaked them in a way that actually is relevant in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, this is like kind of a general thing, a general trend that I've noticed is oftentimes new sounds or new trends in this industry, and I'm sure you guys have noticed the same thing, is usually from sort of appropriating some old technology or technique or whatever and sort of applying it in a different context than what you would expect. It's like, oh, but did you know if you try this pedal in front of it, you get this other sound, and it's like, that's great and it's really cool, but that's an accident. That's not on purpose. So then it's looking at like, okay, so what about this accident is working to my advantage? And then if that's the case, then what do I wish we could tweak about it? Like, for example, the high pass filter and low pass filter on a tube screamer are what create the sort of tightness and smoothness that you get when you put it in front of a high gain amp. It was never intended to be used like that, but that's what it works really well for. And the high pass filter is the most noticeable effect. So it was like, well, what if we had a variable high pass filter? Because sometimes people complain about there not being enough low end, sometimes too much. And it's definitely down to the amp and the guitar. It's definitely down to your setup. So there's no one solution that works for everything. So why don't we just make it variable, and then you can adjust it like depending on your rig. And that seemed like a good idea. And it seemed like also the next thing is that anyone who was doing that, because of the added noise in that setup, would always be putting a gate of some kind afterwards. So it was like, well, why not just put that on the pedal? And all this stuff was also like sort of crowdsourced. Like, one thing we wanted to do was to get people's feedback on this, because one thing that me and my partners at Horizon were discussing was like, it's almost like a guessing game. We realized like, oh, well, what should we put out? Well, what do people want? It's like, well, I think they want this. It's like, well, how about instead of thinking what they want, why don't we just ask them what they want, And
dude, we do that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like why figure out, especially when we have a great tool like the internet. I understand why before, you didn't have access to people, but now we have access to people, and people like have access to. People like answering questions. People like being involved with community stuff. If there's anything that we've learned with Periphery, it's that, being very close with your fan base is only a good thing. It's only a good thing. At least for us, it's been. So we're like, well, why don't we take that same attitude and let's see what these guys come up with pedals. And they're obviously, the first question we get is like, like, well, how are you sure you won't end up with something crappy, And it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna filter this to some degree. It's not gonna be like that Mountain Dew campaign where they named the drink Hitler wasn't so bad, because it was like
Is
an
that
open
what won?
yeah, because it was just like input whatever name and vote on it. That's a lesson that you learned. So we are filtering this. You're not gonna end up with that pedal, but there are some really creative ideas. There's some really creative ideas and some really good feedback that we got. It was sort of a shorter process with this first pedal, the precision drive that we put out, but we're already starting to pull for even what direction we go in for the new one. And the response that we got was just insane. I mean, even the pre-sales on the pedal have been way beyond what we expected. So it shows that people want to be involved, and it shows that there is something there to be explored. And I'm actually just kind of excited, because I'm not entirely sure what we're going to put out, but it's going to be kind of up to the community. It's going to be, someone was saying like, oh, is that your signature pedal? I was like, actually, it's your signature pedal. You guys are the ones that are designing this, We're going to put it together. We're going to filter it so that it's a good idea on a working pedal, and we're going to make sure that it's top quality. But it's your ideas that are going to be the basis of what will form this new pedal.
Such a smart idea, actually responding to the needs and wants of the marketplace in real time.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's like, wouldn't you want to be giving people what they want, rather than having to guess and hope,
Like I said, man, we do that all the time over at Nail the Mix and URM Academy.
Yeah.
I mean, since we do education, we always balance it with what they want to know versus what we know that they need to know. So, like, for instance, on our URM enhanced level, which is above Nail the Mix, we have a set of a video library called Fast Tracks. They're like courses, like 2 or 3 hour long courses of very specific things like gain staging or how to actually hear compression, things like that. And we know that they wanted to get some of these topics in there, but we make the order that you go in at the beginning required, so that it's required that you go through the gain staging one. It's required that you go through the mix prep one as prerequisites, because gain staging and mix prep are two of the most important things that you could do to mix properly, but those are the two things that people will skip because they'll want to get right to compression,
right,
and the fun stuff. So we'll source the crowd to find out what it is that they want to learn, and then we'll, like you did, we'll filter it, and then we'll superimpose that, or we'll combine that with what we know that they need to know in order to be able to actually utilize what they want to know.
Yeah, and I think that's really smart. That's like how you can sort of have your cake and eat it too, with that whole way of delivering the lessons, and the content. I think that's really smart.
It works great, man, because they actually are getting better, and they are enjoying it at the same time. So,
by the way, thanks for focusing on gain staging and mix prep, because those are probably the two most boring, annoying to learn about subjects that really don't have any immediate, there's no instant gratification from that, but it's probably like the most important skills you could learn, like, to tell you the truth. Like,
dude, it's crucial.
It's probably especially if they're sending stuff off to be mixed after the fact. Like, God, like that saves everyone a lot of time. So you're building the next generation of engineers that'll make sure that mixes sound better and that people won't be as annoyed with the mixes they get.
Well, that's okay. Well, the thing is, we actually want people to be able to get hired. Like, we realize that not every single person who subscribes is going to have a career, and that's fine.
Yeah,
it's not possible.
It's not. It's just not.
But yeah, no, it's not. But we do want a certain percentage of our students to actually do this for real. That's the goal. We want to create professional engineers out of this, and one of the most hireable skills, I guess, that you can have is to know how to set up a session properly.
Yeah,
that mixers will pay you for that. That will.
It's not glamorous, but that's an entry point. That's an entry point like no other. You want to get your foot in the door? Do that. It's better than clean the toilets.
I cannot tell you how many mixes I set up for people for years, and drums I edited, samples I laid, vocals I tuned. I did that shit for
all the annoying busy work, but that has to be done to a certain standard, or else it's fucking useless.
I think it's the same in movies too. I've heard that the best directors tend to come from the editing room.
Right. Right. It's just you're working your way up. And then they're like, "Whoa, you got some skills. Oh, that's kind of sick." Like that's 100% true. Or it's like with touring, I always tell people, like, yeah, you want to be in a touring band? Go do merch for a band for free. You want to be on tour? That's how you can do it. Oh, my band can't get tours. Yeah, well, go on tour. Just go and tech for someone for free, and then you'll be shocked how in 2 years you'll know everyone in the industry and everyone will know you, and you'll all of a sudden have all these opportunities. I've seen it happen. We've been there for or we've done that for people. We've seen their growth over years. It's like, it's not the obvious path, it's not the glamorous path, but it fucking works.
Dude, is there really a glamorous path in this anymore?
No, absolutely not. Anyone who thinks there is just you're just guaranteed disappointment. I think, again, this goes back to being realistic, setting realistic expectations and managing them. Because if you think that you get to be a rock star, if you think you get to, if you think any of what we do is glamorous, it's like you talk about being humble. Well, this industry is humbling. Like, there's no room for those egos because of how humbling this industry is. And there, you know, especially if you're doing like rock and metal and stuff like that, it's really just, it's passion stuff, and there's less money in it than there ever was. So there's no glamorous way, there's no glamorous point of entry, there's no glamorous lifestyle, you know? You do it because you love it.
Well said. So how do you feel about answering some questions from the crowd? Because we've got a few.
Yeah.
They were very excited.
Totally cool.
Cool. All right, so here's one from Karsten Honsack, which is, Misha, how do you approach writing MIDI instrument parts so that they sound nearly human and not like a robot playing a synth violin?
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. So he's talking about the orchestral stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's it's the same as you'd program drums or anything like that, just in terms of the approach. It's just being very careful with the velocities. With all these sample libraries, it's very tempting. I'm sure you guys have seen this with drums. Like, because the loudest velocity always sounds sort of the most impactful, it's very tempting to just always go full velocity on everything. I think one thing to do is actually to not start at full velocity, like maybe just short of it if you're going for something intense, but understanding that like you want to have some headroom to be able to use for impacts and things like that. And then the other thing is just spending the time with it. Like, I hate to say it, but like speaking of unglamorous work, so much of what I do is just boring, like editing and tweaking and experimenting and sort of knowing what sound I'm going for. And every library is different, so sometimes you won't get the result you want and you'll have to like combine patches. Sometimes, like for example, a violin legato patch, it sounds great on its own, but in the mix it's just sounding kind of synthy, and it's you know, so if you layer a spiccato patch with that, for example, you can sort of get that bow change effect a little bit, and it'll actually cut through. But that's just one example. And I'm getting very, very specific here, but it's just it's spending the time with that kind of stuff and experimenting, because there isn't any one solution. And I think a lot of people are looking for this sort of one size fits all answer. But you guys know as well as I do that, like, you know, a mix is a mix, and when you change one thing, everything else changes. So what worked in that last mix will not necessarily work in this mix, and you might have to find a new solution to that. So don't just go through the same process expecting to get the same result. You might have to branch out and try different things, and don't be afraid to do that is the point. And don't be afraid to spend some time on it, because all the stuff that sounds good did not happen quickly. there's I guarantee you a lot of time was put into that, and a lot of careful thought, well spent time, I would say, was put into that. So that would be my advice. I
echo that. None of that stuff happens easily when it comes to virtual instruments. Here's one from Jake Hankel, which is, Misha, what does your daily guitar practice regimen consist of? Is it scales, rhythms? I don't practice guitar, man. I wish I did. This is getting into a deeper philosophical thing here. I think I figured that you were going to say that. When I was younger, I practiced and I tried to practice. I've never had the mind for practice. I've always been more of a creative. So what would happen is I'd like start trying to practice scales. I get bored out of my mind and I just start trying to write riffs. And I used to get really upset about that, but I'm starting to realize that maybe, you know, I'm not a technician. I'm really not. And I know so many people who, on the technical side of things, are just light years ahead of where I'm at. And that's okay, you know, because that's just not what I focus on. I like to write. But if you want to be a technician, you know, you can find all sorts of resources on YouTube, online, for free or paid, you know, to get that stuff. And, you know, being in a band with a guy like Nolly, who really is a technician, and really, like, the amount of detail that he puts into his technique is insane. It's mind-boggling. And that's stuff that he practices and works on. I would say take it to that level. But for me, it's more about the creative side, and I've started to acknowledge that and stop trying to force myself to practice, because I am working on my technique, but I just realized that I'm just never going to be that guy. I'm never going to be that guy that you're going to watch and you're going to be like, wow, I want his technique. Like, my technique's always going to hold me back a little bit, and that's what I work on it on. So it holds me back as little as possible, but I just don't enjoy practicing, and I don't get anything out of it. The times I've forced myself to practice, it's like,
I'll get better at it for that day, and then the next day it's like if you don't maintain it, then then it's all gone anyways. And I was like, I didn't really get anything from that. Like that didn't really do what I wanted it to do. But if I spend that time writing a song or writing an idea and I end up with something, I have something that I can look back at. So my pursuits now are more into the sort of abstract, like just writing and trying to filter out what's good, what's worth working on, and trying to get over my weird insecurities with music and trying to write all that fun stuff that happens when you write a lot of music. But I haven't even been playing guitar that much. Lately, I've been getting so much pleasure from writing orchestral mock-ups and things like that. Like that's really been tickling my fancy. So that's the stuff I've been practicing, if anything. And that I'll spend hours and hours doing without, the hours will disappear. And if the hours are disappearing, then you're probably doing something that you enjoy. So, that's kind of what I'm tending towards, is things that I enjoy doing rather than things that I feel like I have to or probably should do.
You'll always do a better job when we're talking about creative ventures with things that you get lost in.
Yeah. As a general mantra, I'm going to share with you guys something that's really seems so stupid, but it's kind of important to me. And I will say that part of this is just because I'm fortunate enough to be where I'm at and, in sort of a comfortable place for the time being. But as things stand now, I've realized that I don't have to do things I don't want to do. And there's a bit of I think that myself and you guys, we'd consider ourselves hustlers, right? We've always had to hustle. We've always had to work. We've always had to do things we don't want to do just to build towards something bigger. But I think what I've learned is also, after you've gotten to a certain point, you can actually afford it to yourself to take a step back and do the things you want to do and not have to, basically learn to say no. Learn to say no to things. I used to get this crippling guilt from saying no to things that I didn't want to do, that I didn't need to do. I didn't need the money. I didn't need anything from it. But it was just this guilt because I came up from hustling, from saying yes to everything, working really hard, doing everything, and realizing now, but that's a big battle. That was a big battle. And I'm finally starting to get the hang of it, but it's just sometimes you just say no. Sometimes you don't do the things you don't want to do if you don't have to. If there's no perceivable benefit, you don't have to do them. And that might sound weird to some of the listeners because maybe they don't have that same complex. Maybe I'm just crazy, but it's like
I completely relate.
But yeah, so basically just saying no to things. And this is like the big picture answer of why I don't practice guitar as much anymore. To loop it all right back home. But yeah, I'm dead serious. That's something I think has made me a lot happier in recent times, is just doing the things that I want to do, doing the things that make me happy, and trying to minimize having to do the things that don't make me happy. I only do them if I have to, or if it's something that leads towards something bigger or something that will make me happy. So yeah.
One thing that we've started doing very heavily is delegating those things, so that we can focus. I know Joey delegates like crazy. I delegate like crazy. And this is so that we can focus on the things that we're best at, so that we can keep our eye on the prize and we can keep things moving forward aggressively. Because the hustle is alive and well. But
right.
As you progress, the things that you need to focus on in order to keep growing become harder and harder and more and higher level, and they take you being more in tune, I guess, in a weird way. You more in tune with the universe, I guess. I don't know how to explain it.
No,
you need
I know
to
what you're saying. I know what you're saying. It's like you're kind of figuring it out. So it's like, oh yeah, this is the way I was supposed to be doing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't be spending the same kind of time on the things you did before.
Right.
Because then you'd be at the same level you were at before.
Well, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much energy. You need to focus that energy efficiently. And delegating is a way to do it. But also, the side you're not mentioning that is you need to have people that you can trust. You need to have people that delegating is useless if people won't do, if you can't trust the people.
We have a great team.
Exactly. I'm sure you do. And it's the same. That's why my band, is a certain group of people and the companies we have are it's all very calculated because everyone kind of focuses on their strengths and doesn't have to focus on things they're not as great at or they don't enjoy doing, and then everything sort of works, and everyone can put their best energy towards things that are productive.
And I hate practicing guitar too.
Me too. That's the point. That's all you need to walk away with. I hate practicing.
Yeah.
Not going to do it. Next.
All right, here's one from Brad Thomas, which is, when writing for a band with 3 guitars, how do you usually split up the responsibility, i.e. who gets the main riff and who provides more of the ear candy?
So we get that question a lot. I think, what people may not fully understand is that the 3 guitar thing is really a live thing, because when I was writing and when we were starting out, and when you have the power of a computer, which has all the tracks that your imagination can muster, you can get kind of crazy. And I was doing a lot of stuff where there'd be a lot more than 3 guitar parts going on. So it was the idea that, like, even with backing tracks, there'd be sort of substantial parts or parts that we wish we wouldn't have to put on a backing track. So generally, whoever writes the riff, gets dibs on how they want to, or what part they want. It's never been a problem. Like, it's really just never been a problem. I'm very lucky to have Mark and Jake being the kind of people that they are. Like, we write so well together. People always ask if there's like ego there or if we battle, and it's like, no, there's relief when I work with them because I got 2 guys who've got my back, who write the sickest riffs that I could never come up with, but that are totally in the style that I'm writing, and we've influenced each other. So it's just this big old circle jerk, basically. And everyone's really open to whatever. We all play rhythm parts, clean parts, lead parts, whatever. There's no moms are calling being like, my son needs more solo time or anything like that, It's just whatever. It always seems to work out really easily. So it's not something that I think about or that I think they think about either. It's something that we can just trust that it'll work out, it'll be fine. But it really is just a live thing, and live it'll either be we're playing 3 completely different parts, or something I like very much is that 2 people will be playing one part, and that will be panned, so it's double tracked, and then the other person will be playing whatever part that is, whether it's a lead, clean, ambient, whatever. And then there's also unison parts, which are very cool because you almost get that quad tracked chorusing effect that you get. It just makes it sound very sort of thick in a very unique way. So I really like having those guys live to play around with, and it just gives us a lot of options with how we're going to approach things live.
Totally. So here's one from Zaylan Ciganera. Man, I'm so sorry I can't pronounce your last name.
This always happens, man.
Yeah. It's Ciganero. I'll just go with that.
We're trying, man.
So could you go over peripheries in your monitor system for practice and stage?
Sure.
That would be incredible.
Yeah. So we're using a Behringer X32 rack unit, which is pretty awesome. I never thought I'd be stoked on Behringer stuff, especially from when I was starting out. Their stuff wasn't so great, but this mixer is awesome. It's you can control it with an iPad, and it has enough submixes that all 6 of us can. Well, now there's 5, but back when there were 6 of us, all 6 of us could control our own mixes using an iPhone or an iPad or whatever. And Marquides, our front of house guy, Alex Marquides, he could actually mix us. He actually did mix us for a bunch of tours off that. So it was like our all-in-one system. It was great. Since then, we've been renting boards just because it sounds better and it's better for him. But it's kind of nice that you can do that. And for like sort of fly rigs, that's amazing. It's everything we need right there. So that then has to go to in-ear monitors, which we have the Sennheiser EW300 G2, I think is what it's called. It's like basically what everyone uses. And we got those, I want to say like 4 years ago, maybe longer. And we're using the same ones. Like they're just super, super reliable and they work great. So that's what actually transmits the sound from our mix to our ears. And then for the in-ears, I think we're pretty much all using 1964 ears. Or no, they're called 64 ears now. But I'm using the A6. And yeah, so basically, I have those are molded in-ears for people who don't know. So they're also earplugs because you really should protect your ears. And given how much I'm mixing, producing, and all that stuff, like I really can't afford to lose my ears. So it's it'll protect your ears, and it'll also give you a very, very clear sound and allow you to have a lot in your mix. And I have my own individual mix that's exactly the way that I need it, with the click, which we all have. We all have a click, and it's actually a very detailed click. Matt, our drummer, turned us on to that, where we have it doing like the 16th note or 8th note subdivision, so you really know where the beat is. But the accents are always a little different, so you can always tell exactly where the beat is. We just found that it helps us play. It helps us play tight. Yeah, he loves it. Like, he loves that. I think it helps him like kind of push and pull on the beat a bit more, because he never really has to guess exactly where the beat is. But it's great. It's great for us. It helps us lock in, and then everyone has complete control over how their mix is, because we're using Axe FXs, and because most of the aspects are consistent. Our mixes are generally consistent, but you will catch us occasionally like changing stuff on the fly, on our phones or iPads or whatever. And it's great to have that freedom if something's not quite right that day for whatever reason.
Cool. All right. So Tyler Rodriguez is asking, what would you say are your influences on your orchestral writing? Any specific movie scores and or composers?
I'd say the only composer that's been like a real influence, probably like Nobuo Uematsu from the Final Fantasy series.
That's great stuff.
Yeah, other than that, it's probably just passive stuff. I've just been kind of going head first. I'm not the read the manual guy. I'm gonna go in head first and try and figure this out for myself. And I don't really know what I'm going for. I'm just kind of playing around with a lot of that stuff. So I'm sure I have passive influences, and I listened to a lot of classical music when I grew up, but like what I'd call the pop classical composers like Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, stuff like that, But I don't think I'm thinking about any of those influences other than maybe Nobuo, but that's only for certain things if I'm trying to do something like very RPG style, Other than that, it's more like having this sort of world. Actually, I'm going to expand on this a little bit, because this is something I've wanted to tell people why I'm into this orchestral stuff. This is probably more of an influence. This is actually probably the influence. Back in 2002, that's when I first started recording. And it's because I had a gaming computer, and I realized that it was finally powerful enough that I could record on it and not have to go to a studio to get my ideas out. And I had a drum kit from Hell, which I ran in Reason. I didn't know anything about DAWs or anything like that. I was just like, again, not reading the manual, just kind of figuring stuff out for myself and having fun. And that to me was the most inspiring thing in the world. That all of a sudden, I, at no cost to myself, could make all this music by myself. And sure, it didn't sound great or whatever, but it was mine, and I could do it whenever I wanted. I could do it in my apartment without bothering anyone, because I could do it on headphones. That to me was like incredible and inspired the crap out of ideas, and that's why I wrote so much. I'd been feeling a little bit uninspired as of late. Well, as of about a year and a half ago, I want to say. I've just been feeling kind of dry on ideas. It happens, We go through ebb and flows as creative people. But I discovered that now we were at the point where you could get very realistic orchestral mock-ups on your computer, and you didn't need like an insane setup. Like you used to have to like chain computers together with like Vienna Ensemble. But it's like now like technology had finally caught up to, and it was basically the advent of SSDs allows you to stream these libraries off, so it doesn't take up a lot of RAM. It takes up CPU power, but CPUs are powerful enough that it catches up. So we're at this point where like all of a sudden it becomes accessible, and it's just money. It's a lot of money, unfortunately, but it was like that was so exciting to me. It's like now an orchestra, which is something that's extremely expensive, extremely expensive, I could mock that up on my computer for fun whenever I want. And that was that same level of inspiration that I felt back in 2002. It was like this new world had been opened up and I knew nothing about it. I still know very little about it. I'm just trying to learn. So that's my inspiration, is that I've discovered this new world for myself and I'm just trying to learn what it is for myself. And that's it.
And just so people understand what you mean by extremely expensive, a C-rate orchestra will cost you approximately $20,000 a day.
Yeah.
To rent, I guess.
And
if
that's
you
not
want to get them to
including the
record
studio,
anything.
by the way.
That's just the orchestra.
That's just the orchestra. Like you know, and considering that we recorded Periphery 3, I think the entire budget just for the recording was probably under $10,000. You know, it's like, well, just the orchestra would be like double or triple that. It's pretty nuts. So, you know,
yeah,
like this is a great solution. And what we did on Periphery 3, which was great, was we then hired a very small section of musicians to play, you know, what I'd programmed over certain parts, and we layered it because these sample libraries that I was using were they're huge sections, so you get the sense of the size, but then the realistic small sections layered over the top gave you that layer of realism and made it not sound like any particular sample library. So it's kind of best of both worlds, and that did not cost us very much money. So that was kind of our way around that.
I want to shout out my friend Trevor Fidel, who helped me do tons of string parts over the years. Really cool guy. His email is trevor.fidel@gmail.com. If you guys are trying to do what Misha's talking about, I've done the same thing. Basically, layer it up with, virtual instruments, and then get Trevor to have like a small 3 or 4 piece, put the real stuff over top of it. And it works so well. And he's
it's kind of incredible how well it works, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, he's set up to where you can just send him your tracks and just say, here's what I want you to play. And then he also will include like a freestyle, right? He works with the students. I can't remember the college that he works with, but he'll have the students come in. They'll play all the parts as you want them to, and then they'll also do like a little freestyle for each instrument. And sometimes those freestyle parts are really cool.
That's awesome. I actually, we worked with this guy Randy Slaw who did the Periphery 2, just that violin part in the beginning of Have a Blast, but we kept him in mind, you know, and he came in at the last minute on Periphery 3 and like did such a great job in so little time, because it was just kind of a last minute, like, hey, do you think you can do this? He's like, oh, I'm gonna try. But I think he works with students as well, and like he did such a great job, especially given that a lot of the parts that I was writing were not really conducive to being played on orchestral instruments, you know, because it's like based around guitarists and drop C. It's like, you know, he had to find some talent to get it done. But you know, that's definitely the kind, what you're talking about, Joey, is definitely the kind of setup that is sort of a cost-effective way to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
All right, here's one from Eduardo Panda Saceda, which is, for the new record, as far as I remember, you used a Friedman BE100 sim in the Axe effects. How do you approach that Plexi-styled amp to sound so brutal?
You know, I think that I have to give all the credit to the Axe effects on that one. It might have been, I was on Quantum 1.0. That was the firmware, and the amps always change a little bit with the firmware, but I actually left one at that firmware because the Friedman model sounds so good. I actually have the real Friedman next to me right now, so it's kind of funny. But there's something about the Axe effects where it's like, you know, it has the character of the amp, but it's sort of a hyper real version of the amp, and that works really well for Periphery. It's like this very sort of clean version of the amp, and we didn't even use a boost for that. You know, it was kind of interesting. It was like kind of a test to ourselves, because we've always used a boost in front of an amp, always, and even live we still do that. But like for the record, in that control environment, we were just trying to see if we could dial the amp in and just pick really hard. And you know, we were using my my Jackson guitars, and those have my bare knuckle Juggernaut pickups, which are just very good. They're designed so that if you pick hard, they'll sound very, very good. So I think the combination of all of that and just picking really hard worked well. But I think it's probably, I have to give most of the credit to Fractal, because they killed it with that firmware and that version of that amp. And the other thing that I think a lot of people don't really realize, but I know for a fact that you guys know, is that so much of what people consider to be guitar tone is the cab or the cab sim or whatever. And like, you know, like that exact patch with like any other cab might not work in the mix, but the cab that we were using, or the cab sim, I should say, that we were using is great. It's from that cab pack I did with them, Cab Pack 13, Misha Mix 8. That one just was magical. Like, it just sat in the mix perfectly. It worked. We didn't have to do much EQ or anything to that guitar tone. I think it was like kind of cool because we wanted Periphery 3 to be a bit more of a raw album, like less like I'd say like Juggernaut had like a lot of sort of, it was a very processed album. It was just like, how huge can we get this to sound? And we use samples where we need to, and, you know, edit the crap out of everything. This one was a very raw album, and like a lot of the takes are very raw, and the approach to the guitar tone was, so it's like we were trying to see how little we could get away with. So the fact that like the guitar tone on Periphery 3, I could just describe to you right now. It's the Friedman BE100 amp model on there with the bright switch on, everything at noon. I think gain was at 6, and maybe we rolled off the bass a little bit, and it's just like the cab Pack 13 Misha Mix 8. That's it. That's Periphery 3 guitar tone right there.
Nice. Okay, here's one from Diego Casillas, which is, what was the most helpful advice you received in relation to mixing and production? What gave you the most major improvements once implemented?
Oh man, I don't think there's a thing. I don't think, and Nolly and I have had these like discussions that there isn't a thing, you know. It's all very small moves, and what Nolly told me is like, you know, he's worked with a lot of producers and met a lot of producers that he respects and engineers that he respects, and some of them have shown him, you know, session files and mixes of things that he really likes, and he could actually see what was going on under the hood. And he said there was no part where there was this like aha, you know, or like this moment of like, oh, there's this crazy thing that he's doing differently. A lot of it had to do with just like how you're capturing the source tones and just small moves, like little moves that like nudge it in a certain direction. And there are little tricks here and there, but none of them are sort of these night and day tricks that like all of a sudden, like, I didn't get it yesterday and I get it today. So that's my answer, is like there isn't something like that. And if you're chasing something like that, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. You should be...
I completely agree, actually.
Yeah, like I figured you guys would agree too, because you probably have come to the same conclusion that there's no like secret magic happy button, you know. It's little calculated moves and experience. And the most important thing, as I think we all know, is just your source tone. Like all the processing in the world doesn't count for a goddamn thing if your source tone sucks. So get it right at the source and understand how to capture a source tone.
I feel like that right there, in my opinion, would be the answer to the question, what's the one thing that has made all the difference instantly? It's get your fucking source tones right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But what that is a long time consuming process. You know, like that's something that you have to figure out what works for you, because again, there's no one way to capture a source tone correctly, and even if there is, it's probably not exactly what you want, and it's a disservice to yourself to resign yourself to some system that someone else set up that was right for them. What you should be doing, in my opinion, is finding out what works for you. Use their guide, their setup as a guideline, but find out what works for you and find out what you want to do and refine your process. I've seen Nolly do this over the, you know, I'm not the mixing guy, I'm the creative guy, but I've watched Nolly obsess over this for years. Like, you know, now everyone sees like he's mixing all these big albums. It's like, it's great for him, but I watched this process start from when he was first mixing on a laptop, asking me for mixing advice, you know, and like how it's just sort of snowballed from there into what it is now. And it's all just very small steps. And before you know it, I'm going to him being like, hey, teach me how to mix. because I suck. You know?
Dude, he's a monster, by the way.
He's an absolute monster. He's an absolute monster, but it's not an accident. He practices all the goddamn time, and it's what he's obsessed with. On tour, he would just be on his laptop, just mixing, just testing, checking out, showing me like the differences between the aliasing between this EQ plugin and that, and how this spectrum shows this and that. It's like crazy the amount of detail that he goes into. But then he uses all that information so musically. Like you'd think like, oh, he's just being clinical. It's no, he's like he keeps that little information in the back of his head so that he can make educated decisions about the sound. And like, you know, he'll set these weird like experiments. Like he'll try to do a mix just with Slate plugins, you know, and like he won't keep it, but he's just like he's learning like what that does, and that's in the back of his head. And then if he has a problem, he's like, oh well, have you ever thought, you know, I go to him with a problem, I'm like, man, I can't get this down, and he'll come with this weird abstract idea that I'm like, that's really clever. How the hell did you think of doing that? You know, and it's literally just because he's experimented with just about everything at this point. So that's the answer. Spend a shitload of time and be obsessed. You know,
I gotta say, man, we've done 13 Nail the Mix months already.
Yeah,
and they're always cool. Like I always learn something. We've had some great people on, but the one that Nolly did, man, in September, God damn, he's heavy. Like,
yeah, he's meticulous.
He's got some knowledge.
He does. And but again, this is not like, I feel like so many people are so quick to write it off as like, oh, he's just smarter, or it's like, I'm telling you, I've watched this motherfucker work. The amount of work that he put into it is why he's good. It's not because he's better or because he's got a better ear for that, or you know, it's like he does have a great ear for it, but you wouldn't get to the level that he's at just off of that. No one would. He's put in so much goddamn work, and that's why he knows as much as he does, and he uses that knowledge to benefit his ear. He's still at the end of the day, he still trusts his ears. That's the number one thing that he does. He just has all this knowledge to back it up.
And that he does. Okay, here's one from Jordan Ambleton, which is, from the armory of pedals you own, which one do you find yourself coming back to over and over?
Ooh. Does it have to be just one?
No. How about which ones do you find yourself?
Okay, yeah. So Caroline Guitar Company has this delay called the Kilobyte. You can actually probably hear that all over all over P3, and maybe Juggernaut. They have it for Juggernaut, but it's got this cool button that makes it self-oscillate. It's a great sounding delay. It's a great sounding delay. I always find myself using that. Same thing with the Free the Tone Flight Time. There's just something about it that just is so sick. Oh, and the Catalan Bread Echo Rec. I love delays. The Afterneath by Earthquaker Devices is just absolutely nuts. I've never really played an effect that's quite like it. It's basically using all these like super cut up, I guess, granular delays to create a big long reverb. It's a really, really cool effect. It's just so well done. And I've yet to play another pedal that really nails what it does. And actually, like, on an interesting point, Walrus Audio put out this overdrive called the 385, which is
I like that company name.
Yeah, Walrus Audio. Oh, they make great pedals. But this overdrive is not a Tube Screamer style overdrive. It's more like one that it makes your amp sound like an old vintage cranked amp. And I got this Marshall hand-wired amp recently, which is sweet, but it's literally like the only controls are volume and tone. It's just a clean amp, but it loves pedals, and that 385 in front of that Marshall is a really special sound. Oh, and I've also I haven't been able to talk about this for a while because I got this in secret for a little bit, but Way Huge sent me the Conquistador Fuzz, their Fuzz Distortion pedal, and I've been jamming that a lot. I just haven't been able to tell anyone about it because I guess I was like kind of beta testing it, but there was nothing wrong with mine, so it was good. But yeah, those are the ones I've been playing with a lot lately. I've been having some fun with fuzzes, which is kind of a new thing because I never thought I'd be into fuzzes, but I don't know, they're fun.
I agree. All right, here's one from Adam Barnes, which is, what guitars, pickups, amp sims do you recommend for a guitarist who's chasing a select difficulty rhythm tone?
Well, all I can recommend is what we used. So we used the Fractal Axe effects. I literally just detailed earlier the exact Axe effects tone. You can get that exact tone on the Axe effects. So just listen to that. And if you've been listening, you already probably took that down. The guitars, because we're at my studio, we were using my Jackson Juggernauts, which have the bare knuckle Juggernaut pickups in them. And what else did he want to know?
And well, I think you covered it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, you covered it. Okay, so Yatin Srivastava, what advice would you give a band that is negotiating a deal with a label, and what are the advantages, disadvantages of label support?
Oh, well, we talked about half of that.
We covered that, half of that, yeah.
The advantages and disadvantages of label support nowadays are very different. It's like we're in an era where they don't have as much to offer like they used to. I mean, if you think about it, a label is supposed to be selling your stuff, but really, you know, physical sales have gone down a lot. Like vinyl's up, but like you can negotiate a vinyl deal with you know, as a separate thing. You don't need to give up your masters for that. I'd say once again, know what you want, understand the climate that you're entering, and make sure you're getting something worthwhile. You know, like what are you giving up? Try to understand what you're giving up. I know nothing about this person's deal or their situation, but try to understand what you're giving up to get what you're getting. There is, to be perfectly honest, as much as I hate to admit it, there still is a sense of, you know, a little X factor or pizzazz or something of having label support, even if it means absolutely fucking nothing at all. There's something about it that just gives you an extra edge, and I think labels are going to use that to their advantage. But even that, you know, the industry's slow to change, but it is starting to catch up. Like, yeah, what is the point of labels anymore? You know, they need to offer something. And I've always thought that like labels and management would start to converge because they'd both realize that they don't offer enough individually to be able to charge what they do, but that together it might be a worthwhile thing. And I think you see some labels that are starting to lean towards that, but just make sure you're getting something worthwhile, because you could probably release it yourself, put it up, you know, on TuneCore to get it up on iTunes, put it up on Bandcamp, you know, front the cost of some CDs and vinyl yourself and sell those. And it's like, would a label be doing anything more? Like, would they might be doing something more, but would they be doing enough to justify what you're giving them? Would they be tripling the amount of sales that you're getting? I don't know. I somehow sincerely doubt that. So it's a tricky one. Be smart.
Yeah, I completely agree. So here's one from Ricky Whiteout. Well, two questions from Ricky Whiteout. Number one, do you see yourself doing film and or video game scores in the future? And number two, can we expect more top secret audio lessons like the drum programming one sometime in the future?
So the first one's video games, movies. I'd love to. I think what people don't understand is that people need to hire me for that. I'm slowly trying to chip away at that. I've had some opportunities, but it's not like I can just go knocking down on their door and be like, hey, I'm ready to do video games and movies. They'll be like, oh,
Maybe.
Come right on. I'm a nobody.
I have arrived.
Yeah, I'm a nobody in that world. You know, I'm trying to slowly make a name for myself, but I'm also trying to get better at that stuff. So if you're listening, you want to hire me for a video game or a movie, and notice my word, I said hire. That doesn't mean do anything on spec, but unless it's a huge project, in which case I'll totally do it on spec. But yeah, feel free to hire me for the lessons. The top secret audio stuff. I mean, that's something that I tried out, and you know, I think the better way to do that is like through the live streams. I've had a better response through all the live stream stuff, so I might explore that. But again, there's only so many hours in the day, and I have to kind of use my time wisely and not forget to give myself some downtime, like I did in the last month, and made myself very miserable. So I just have to be careful with that. But there will be more educational content coming out. I'll say that much, one way or another.
Okay, Jack Hartley's asking, when you experience writer's block, how do you deal with it? Are you the type of person that writes constantly, or do you have to be particularly inspired?
No, I definitely need to be inspired, and when I force it, it usually doesn't work out well. There's a bunch of different ways to approach it. I just sometimes just take time off. I do other things. I do anything but music. And then like when you go back to it, it's like, oh yeah, this whole thing, and it's fresh again, you know? But I've learned not to force it. I've learned to have fun with it. Like, you want to be having fun when you're doing it. It shows otherwise. So find your system. If it's like you're having a writer's block on like a certain part, or if you're like kind of blocked at a certain part, Nolly gave me this one tip, which I thought was great, which was like, think of everything that you definitely wouldn't do. You know? What definitely wouldn't come next? What definitely wouldn't be the next riff? And then you can sort of narrow it down, because sometimes this sense of option paralysis is what sort of manifests itself as writer's block. And when you have the power of a computer and everything, you know, I can make any style of music I want in front of me on my computer, that can be what's sort of blocking the creativity. So trying to find ways around that can help. Maybe giving yourself some weird limitation, or finding some arbitrary way to define what you're about to do, like, oh, you want it to be this vibe or that vibe, or only use these instruments or whatever. You know, that can be a good way to spark it. But if it's not happening, don't force it. That's my advice.
Completely agree. All right, here's one from Colin McGeo, which is, in the early days starting out, how did you go about finding musicians that had skills you sought for in musicians, but also aligned with your musical vision's goals? Was it purely friend referrals, or did you make connections through some further education, or did you use social media to reach out? Did you go through people that conflicted with your visions and goals before you ended up with the crew you have today? And if so, what difficulties did you have to overcome during any personal transitions, and how did you overcome them? Basically, what's your whole life story?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the funny thing is the answer to most of that is yes. Like, yes, it was all of that. It was everything. It's really fucking hard to find band members. And the first band I was ever in was only one other band before Periphery, and it was called Bulb, and it was in Toronto, and it was with my best friend at the time. And it was that classic thing of, you know, he wanted to go in one direction, I wanted to go in another. It fell apart at the seams, and, you know, we haven't talked since. I don't think. You know, not that I hold anything against the guy. It's just that's the way I guess it worked out, and we went our separate ways. But it made me sort of realize, like, hey, maybe you should just do it yourself. You have the tools to do it yourself. And in putting my music out, then people were coming to me already understanding what it was. So that was no longer a conversation. It was like, hey, I know what you're going for. I understand what you're going for. But it's still difficult to find people that you gel with. Like, my advice is just don't settle. It's a very long, arduous process. And, you know, we have a good lineup, but it took a very, very, very long time. And it took a few member changes to even get to that point. You know, it's hard. And the reason is because you don't know if you're good off the road. What are you like on the road? Well, you won't find out until you start touring. What are you like in the studio? What are you like in this situation? And until you've sort of encountered all these situations, you won't really know. And then the other half is the attitude. I'm so thankful to have a band that is introspective. When we have problems, we talk about them and we come out stronger, because everyone is like, no one is like, okay, my shit doesn't stink. If someone's doing something that annoys someone else, the attitude's like, oh shit, I made someone I really love and care about feel bummed out with something I did. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm really going to work on that. And with a different type of personality, that could easily escalate into like, okay, that's how it is. Well, then fuck you, I'm out, you know? And I think that's what does happen a lot, but, you know, a little bit by design, but I'm glad that it's worked out this way. My band members are all like that. They're introspective. They're open to working on themselves. I've had that conversation with people. I've been the recipient of that conversation. We've all had to work on our personalities, and we are all trying to make this work as a relationship. So finding people who want to work with you, both musically and personally, and I would put a big emphasis on personally, because that's such a big thing that no one else sees, but that you have to deal with every day in very confined spaces. Like, that's the trick. And it's just kind of, again, knowing what you want, knowing what you're going for, and making sure that you're communicating at all points, so that you minimize the amount of problems that you have, and you don't let stupid things like resentment build up and explode into stupid fights, you know? But it's been a learning process, man. We're getting better at it too, you know?
So here's one from Sasha Vino, which is, You say that you play your guitar DIs into your Roland and Moog synths a lot of the times. It sounds awesome. Do you know any software synths that can do that? I hate program guitar solos into MIDI.
I don't know that that's accurate. I don't put my guitar DI into the synths.
Sasha Vino's been smoking the funny grass.
What I do is I'll some lead lines I'll like program what I played on guitar and double that. But yeah, I don't. I think you can, but like it would just be to like run the guitar like through the filter or something like that of the Moog. But I don't do that. Sorry,
Sorry,
pal.
Sasha. Well, actually, we have a question that kind of takes that a little further about that, was from Joe Trumbull, which he says, Misha, I'm a gigantic fan of Periphery and would like to congratulate you on the Grammy nomination. I have my own opinion on the Grammys, but it's fantastic to see incredible music recognized by the mainstream. I've noticed from the Remain Indoors doc and such that you have made a habit of tucking synths under some leads, like some kind of magical sauce. Could you elaborate what kind of processing goes into this, as well as what synths you're using?
So yeah, on the on Periphery 3, I had just gotten a Sub 37, a Moog Sub 37, really just to learn more about synthesis. But that damn thing sounds so good always that we just kind of put it, when we're writing, it's just like, hey, you have an idea? Try it out. What's the worst that could happen? And every time we would try it, it was just like, everyone was like, yeah, that sounds way better. And it would sort of fatten up leads and just add this quality to it that was just very pleasant to the ears. So we, that synth found its way onto pretty much every song on the album. I also I got a Korg mini log later in the process, so that was on there as well, just to get like sort of a different sound. And that's a poly synth. The Sub 37 can only do one note at a time. The mini log can do four. So, and we were also using soft synths and stuff like that. But the truth is, I mean, you can get good sounds with anything, but it's great when you have something that just sort of works. And that Moog just worked. It was just like we could focus just on creative because we really didn't have to do much processing. Sometimes we'd run that through the Axe effects, and get, guitar style tones or delays or whatever going on it, or make it super ambient sounding. But whatever we did, it always seemed to just complement the sounds and the music very well. So we just experimented and had some fun with it.
I've done that quite a bit as well, and I just feel like it's I feel like my favorite mixes are ones that have very unique textures.
Right.
And there's just something magical that happens when you start layering sounds that you're familiar with new kinds of sounds.
Absolutely.
So, layering a rhythm line with a distorted synth, or a lead with a synth, or it's almost the same idea as having a parallel compression on the snare, a really distorted compressed snare. Like it adds texture, and you could call it ear candy or whatnot, but it just makes recordings better.
Well, here's the interesting thing is that, like, in a lot of these things, you might not realize that there's the synth there, but if I were to mute it, you'd definitely hear that something got lost. There was something that's missing, and that's the thing. You're not hearing necessarily just the synth or just the guitar, but it's like that combination, like you were saying. It's like that's a very pleasant sound, and so we've just been experimenting with that and playing around with that. Because again, what's the worst that can happen? It sucks and you don't use it.
That's right, which is not that big a deal.
Not that big a deal.
Nope. So Misha, I want to thank you so much for coming on, being so generous with your time and so open with your answers. It's been fantastic talking to you.
Yeah, man. No, thanks. It's been an absolute pleasure. Sorry for talking your ear off for almost 2 hours now.
Well, that's actually the secret to a podcast, is that now I don't have to talk and you can talk.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do all the talking for you. It's not a problem at all.
I'm sure people wanted to hear what you had to say more than me anyway.
Well, and you're kind of sick, Joey. I don't want you to ruin. You sound sick. You probably you need to take some medicine or something. You've been sick for like a week now.
Yeah, don't go to Vegas when 400,000 people go to Vegas.
Yo, do you take zinc every day?
Yeah, I am taking zinc right now.
Oh man, I've been taking zinc like every night before I go to bed for like the last 3 years. I don't know if it's a placebo effect or not, but I just don't get sick anymore. And it's
No,
like,
that's real stuff, man. That's
Yeah.
real. Zinc is very powerful.
yeah, so like because I used to get sick, like not often, but when I'd get sick, I'd get like sick for like a week, and now the worst I'll get is like a sore throat for like a day or two, and it's gone. But like it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
tour, traveling, whatever. So I just take that stuff religiously, and I take it before bed because it used to like kind of upset my stomach. If I take it even with a meal, it would just make me feel like nauseous. But if I take
Yeah.
it before bed, if you're lying horizontally, you don't even have to go to sleep. But like as long as you're lying horizontally, could be on an empty stomach, you'd be fine. So I just take it before bed every night, and it's helped me out. So that's a little tip for Joey, little tip for everyone else who I should start a zinc company.
Yeah, totally. You're on it.
Anyways, thanks so much for having me, guys. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks for coming on, dude.
Of course. See ya.
This episode of the Unstoppable Recording Machine podcast is brought to you by Joey Sturgis Tones, creating unique audio tools for musicians and producers everywhere. Unleash your creativity with Joey Sturgis Tones. Visit joeysturgistones.com for more info. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy/podcast and subscribe today.